Hello and welcome. I'm João Santos, and I'm joined here by the other half of this podcast,
Akash Lush.
and this is Mildly Interesting.
Mildly interesting. No, seriously, just mildly interesting.
Right, so how are you today, Akash?
I'm doing pretty alright. I'm doing pretty well.
Well, things are not so nice in the Poland-Belarusian border.
Oh boy. What a segue.
So thousands of migrants, mostly Iraqi Kurds and Syrian, have been stacking up at the Polish border. Not just Poland, of course. There's been Latvia and Lithuania as well. So to respond to this, Poland has sent a good old 12,000 troops to the border. So the military response always welcome.
Yeah, that's what you need to calm down a situation. You just send in the military. We should also probably clarify that the asylum seekers or migrants, they're coming from Belarus. And my favorite part about this headline is that the EU have accused Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, sorry if I got that wrong, but they've accused Lukashenko of gangster-style tactics. Because you know that's what gangsters do. They send migrants at you.
See, Eminem and 50 Cent, you know, that's what they do. for some context, in 2020, Lukashenko got into office again. He's been in power since '94, and I don't know about you, but I don't really trust his elections. He got 80% of votes.
It wasn't suspicious at all that the opposition leader just happened to go into exile into Lithuania. And also the EU, the vote was basically widely condemned because they believed it was rigged.
Yeah, so what he did, basically, they issued some sanctions, which is basically what started this whole forged migrant crisis, right? So what they did was they issued sanctions in terms of equipment and software that would intercept communications. They stopped goods being transferred to Belarus that could be used for military purposes. They also restricted trade in petrol and tobacco. They restricted access to EU markets and basically stopped as well funding in projects of the public sector, which is a really, really shitty thing to do if you think about it. Right? So you're mad at a country, you're mad at a president, really, at one person. So you stop funding of public sector projects. So you're basically just hurting those at the bottom, aren't you? Do you really think that Lukashenko cares about a school not being fucking built? He doesn't.
No, this is Europe's last dictator. Like he's won the election. He's in office. That's all he cares about. He has the power.
Exactly. So why did Belarus done this? Well, they were hoping, or at least that's what's thought, they were hoping to force the EU to drop or ease sanctions, right? So basically what they do is they send migrants and wait for the EU to beg them to stop, really. Now, why is this such a big deal? In my opinion, it escalates just because of Russia, because Russia is vocally in support of Belarus.
Yeah.
Fair to point out though, both countries have denied orchestrating this migrant rush.
I think it's important to point out that the reason Belarus is Lukashenko is being accused of orchestrating everything is because he started giving mass tourist visas to migrants and asylum seekers, sort of through backdoor policy, promising them an easy way into the EU, because Belarus borders, like you said, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland, all EU states. So most of these migrants are just people looking for a better life. They've come from war-torn Syria, or they've come from problematic states in Africa, and they're just looking for a better life that the EU promises. Belarus is low-key promising them that by being hey, we can give you a tourist visa, and with this tourist visa you can cross the border into Poland or Lithuania or Latvia and have a life there. And so I think that's what the EU meant by gangster style tactics. He's doing what a dictator does. He's manipulating common people into furthering his own agenda, which is to strike back at the EU.
Yeah, it's really one of like the bad thing about these conflicts, that the people who actually get at the wars are the people at the bottom. I listened to a podcast the other day.
Was it mildly interesting?
It's certainly better, mildly interesting. But I listened to a podcast the other day. There were reports of Russian and Belarusian agents slipping into EU amongst the migrants. So,
Really?
new James Bond movie, maybe?
New James Bond set in Eastern Europe. Sorry.
Yeah, this is just one of those claims you always have, isn't it? So,
Yeah.
so for reference, Belarusian authorities they're saying they're providing people with food and heat and basic livable conditions, but any video you see online is just people hanging around fireplaces. So what's being done, Akash?
Not much, to be honest, is there? Recently, I think the UK sent like a detachment of troops to help Poland deal with the migrant crisis. I know that recently a group of migrants did try and storm the barbed wire. The Belarusian side has been accused of firing shots into the air. Of course, all of this has been denied. The EU, as it does, have attempted. So the EU has said that they may give harsher sanctions, but the Belarus has threatened to cut off the They've threatened to cut off the Russian gas pipeline that runs through Belarus into the EU. It's a weird thing where like people don't think Lukashenko is serious because he gets paid to transport that gas, so they don't think he would do it. But this is word for word. This is a statement that Lukashenko like put out, and he sounds like a James Bond villain. I will say that he sounds like a James Bond villain. He said, "We are heating Europe and they are threatening us. And what if we halt natural gas supplies? Therefore, I would recommend the leadership of Poland, Lithuanians, and other empty-headed people think before speaking."
Think before
Yeah.
speaking. Wow.
Yeah. But then obviously this all has to go through Russia.
Yeah, President Putin has said that it would be a breach of contract if they actually stop gas supplies.
Yes.
So it's not likely to happen.
No.
But one thing that he said is that the EU is considering or launching new sanctions on Belarus. And I just wonder how effective that can be, because effectively, Belarus is having most of its economic trade with Russia already.
Yeah.
So they would just be getting more dependable on Russia, which for Russia is not really a problem, is it?
No.
And for Belarus, well, they're already being dependent on them. So more sanctions, I don't know how effective that could be. There have been other measures, though. There have been some countries like Turkey has stopped Belarus flights. So from people who came from the countries where the migrants like originate from. So from Syria and from Iraq and from other African countries. Which, well, it might help on the short term. I just don't know how effective it could be.
I feel like at this point, everyone involved is just scrambling for, like, to just deal with the problem at hand. I don't think anyone's thinking of the long-term solution. I don't think the EU wants to deal with Belarus because, like I said, Lukashenko is Europe's last dictator, and the EU doesn't want to be seen like canoodling with him, so to speak.
Yeah, but how do you solve this though? Because really, if you're the EU, you cannot ease sanctions, because if you ease sanctions, you'll be basically saying, you know what, you win, right?
Yeah.
And you're basically giving a dictator the power that he wants.
Yeah.
So, but you can't really just shoot the migrants, can you? Or like intervene militarily.
Yeah, preferably not.
So this is a question I came up with. It's who's more to blame on this case? In this, not how we came to this, because obviously Lukashenko is the one to blame for this.
Yeah.
But right now, who's more to blame? Because you got Poland on the one side intervening militarily and basically not letting the EU help in any way, almost. And on the other side, you got, well, Lukashenko, who's just feeding migrants to the problem. So who's more? Who do you think is more to blame?
I guess probably Poland. It's
Yeah.
it's the same if you ask like who started World War One. Like everyone's gonna get into a big tuffle about it because like everyone started World War One basically. But you always have like there's an action and then there's a response to the action. And
Was the response adequate?
I don't think it was. Like I get it, because I've seen the numbers. This is like Lithuania like had like what 200 times what asylum seekers they had last year enter the border this year.
Yeah, in Poland it was 17,000 this month. I mean, in October, as opposed to 1,000 the months prior to it.
Yeah, but I still reject the idea that military response is the only way to handle like big groups. If it were up to me, you would have sort of a special task force for this kind of issue, because as soon as you send military, like, I mean, you can see from any point in history, as soon as the military gets involved, stuff starts escalating, because it's kind of like, it's the fear that the military brings, and it's out of fear that humans react with less cautiousness.
Yeah, it is a very sort of weird thing to navigate though, because no matter what you do, you're not like someone's losing on this, you know. And ideally, you'd have obviously Lukashenko losing on this, but it's not looking like it's gonna happen, at least for the time being. What I think is more likely to happen now is for the EU and not Poland, Belarus, to have sort of like an agreement, which would probably mean easing sanctions, or is some sort of agreement that would probably look bad for the EU, which really what means is, well, Lukashenko kind of wins. Right, so moving into more serious matters, we at Mildly Interesting present you with our award for the Idiot of the Week, a segment that we will have to sort of break from the seriousness that comes before. So Akash, are you excited for this week's Idiot?
Oh boy, I don't know who the Idiot of the we haven't shared. I have an Idiot of the Week, I think, but I can't wait to hear who your Idiot of the Week is. I'm so excited.
Right, so my Idiot of the Week is called Dennis Hawkins. Right? So tell me something, Akash. What would you do? Like, what's the main thing you worry about if you're gonna rob a bank?
Oh, I don't know. Probably them like tracing it back to me.
Yeah.
Going to jail.
So you'd worry about these guys, like making it not seem like it's you, right?
Yeah.
Well, Dennis, our Idiot of the Week, he thought the same thing. So he thought the best way to disguise himself would be to wear clown pants, a blonde wig, and fake breasts. Not only that, but he also left his goatee and mustache unshaved.
Right. Okay.
Now he's either the most idiot robber I've ever seen, or he's the most woke robber I've ever seen. I'll let you pick whichever you want.
That is the best pirate I've ever seen. Fucking Oh, please tell me there were pictures of him.
There were pictures of him. Yes.
Oh, and did they catch him?
Well, I would like to say they did catch him. Yes. I think that I don't think the fake tits fooled the police, to be honest.
What a botched boob job. Can't even fool the police. So this is gonna be a short one. My idiot of the week is the customer I had at my pub who asked us to defrost their ice cream because it was too icy. I wish I was joking. That was a heck of a day. We were down 2 managers and we had a customer complain that their ice cream was too icy and they wanted us to defrost it.
Did you actually
and
defrost it?
We kind of just looked at each other and we were just like, so just let it melt maybe? Just leave it on the side? We left it under like the heat lamps for a little bit, and then we sent it back, and then they sent it back, and they were like, "Yeah, the customer wants us to defrost it better," and we were just like, "What do you mean?
Better?
What do you mean? It's ice cream." I don't. What?
Do you want to give him a name? I know you don't know the name, but like, do you want to give him a name?
You know what? His name is gonna be Barry. Barry, wherever you are, I hope that ice cream was melty. Just get a milkshake. If you you want melted ice, just get a milkshake, mate. Just get what? What do you mean? What do you mean defrosted ice cream?
Oh, I love it.
So now we move on to the Horn of Africa, a region of Africa that many believe has been strategically important for centuries now, controlling trade and an easy route into the Mediterranean from Asia, and because of that has been conflict-ridden for centuries now. But currently, it seems the warring factions are Ethiopia and the Tigray People's Liberation Front. So, a little bit of background. Ethiopia is the continent's second most populous country and the bulwark of the strategically important Horn of Africa, and currently it is tearing itself apart. So, it has the country's ethnic-based federal system, so it's divided itself into states based on sort of the prominent ethnicity there, and people send representatives from their ethnic states to the federal government. The country's ethnic-based federal system has held close to 3 decades, but it is right now could be shattered because of rising ethnic tensions. And obviously, as we've stated before, whenever conflict happens, civilians are sort of the ones caught in the crossfire, and this civil war is no exception. Sadly, civilians we have seen sort of ethnic cleansing and discrimination, sexual violence, and mass murder. Ethiopia went into a state of emergency on the 2nd of November, and currently many are classifying it as a civil war.
Yeah, but I think we have to go a bit back. So, in 1991, the TPLF basically, through the EPRDF, they basically overthrew the government that had been run since 1974, right?
Yeah.
So until 2018, the country actually seemed to go forth in economic standards. So I believe it was the third country in the world with the most growth for a time. Basically, obviously, this wasn't all good, just because the elections were a sham, with opposition like being killed or jailed, basically a sort of dictatorship, even if you don't want to call it that, right? Yeah. So in 2018, Abiy Ahmed, and I'm sorry if I butchered that name, overthrew the government, basically, right? There was the TPLF were ousted from power, and he created the Prosperity Party. Now, this is important, in my opinion, because Abiy won a Nobel Peace Prize in 2019 for ending the conflict with Ethiopia's neighbor, Eritrea, and I'm again sorry if I butchered that. But he got a Nobel Peace Prize for it. A year later, he basically waged war on Tigray. So he's probably like getting up there in the body count of Nobel Peace Prize winners at this point.
Yeah, I've never heard a Nobel Peace Prize winner with a kill count similar to those of pro players on COD. But our boy Abiy is one of them. So I think it's important to note that this topic is there's a lot of focus on ethnic identity.
Yeah.
Specifically because that is how the Ethiopian government has been arranged for the past like 30 years or so. Is that each state is grouped based on ethnicity. So the Tigray region is inhabited by the Tigray population. And although they only make about 7% of the total Ethiopian population, their region's party, the Tigray, the TPLF, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, did rule from 1991 until 2018 because they pretty much rigged the elections. So Abiy sort of came in on a sweep of promises of democracy, like true democracy, and that real good sort of homegrown American democracy.
And he was very much supported for it by everyone in the West.
And like we said, he got a Nobel Peace Prize in 2019 for brokering peace with Eritrea, a region that has had many conflicts and disagreements with sort of mainland Ethiopia. However, I would like to note that he did get stripped of that Nobel Peace Prize in a move that's never happened before, because it came to light the only reason he brokered peace with Eritrea is they promised troops to help him fight the Tigray people. So, I mean, peace for more war isn't exactly peace, so you know what? Makes sense. No Peace Prize for you, sir.
Yeah, they're just handing those out, though, aren't they? At this point, like they have no criteria whatsoever.
You get a Peace Prize, and you get a Peace Prize. Everybody gets a Peace Prize.
Everybody gets a Peace Prize. But really, what happened for this to start? Because obviously, as much Abiy might be a degenerate, it didn't start without a trigger. So in 2020, because of the COVID pandemic, Abiy said that the elections wouldn't take place, at least until the restrictions because of COVID stopped and everything was better, right? Well, the TPLF and Tigray, they didn't agree with it. So what they did, they held elections anyway. Following that, Abiy decided to just cut all funding to Tigray, which then led to what Akash already said: ethnic massacres, attacks in civilian areas, rape as well, and withholding of aid to Tigray, especially. So they're not letting in international groups to help the people who need help, don't they?
This isn't targeting the people in power. This isn't targeting the TPLF. This is targeting Tigray, the region itself, and the Tigray people. People who may not have any political affiliation with their region's party, but they're suffering the consequences anyway, just because they live there. And it's important to note that because he's declared a state of emergency, suspects can be detained for as long as the state of emergency lasts, with no explanation. House-to-house searches can be conducted without a warrant, and this requires citizens to carry identity cards, some of which, like those issued by some of the ethnic regions, can show your ethnicity on it. So it really is it's ethnic-based politics, and it's gone very sour.
And it's one of the problems as well is that Abiy is just controlling propaganda in the country, especially in the rest of the country that is not Tigray, but he's just controlling every bit of propaganda. So one of the headlines that I pulled out was a conspiracy theory that his ministers, I would imagine, threw to the media, which says that the US is supplying TPLF fighters with drug-laced biscuits. Which is very dumb because, well, I mean, I guess if you think about it, there's nothing more dangerous than a high dude with a machine gun, right?
Man, those digestives.
It's all about those digestives. But what it means basically is that the people as it happened throughout history, the people inside the country have no idea of what's actually going on, or the reasons why it's actually going on. Which just makes this even more dangerous because then they're willing to do anything.
If you're wondering who fired the first shot, technically the TPLF fired the first shot. They attacked a government military base last November. However, the party said the assault was a response to government troops landing in a nearby region to prepare for their own attack. And the Prime Minister did in fact declare a military offensive that same day. Soon after, seemingly contrary to Mr. Abiy's liberal values, he restricted internet and phone services while declaring a 6-month state of emergency, which has now escalated into a permanent nationwide state of emergency. And obviously, this conflict, like I said, is very, emphasized on ethnicity. The Tigrayans have teamed up with the Oromo Liberation Army, OLA, and the TPLF and OLA have teamed up and have managed to push government forces outside of the Tigray region and are marching towards Addis Ababa, which is Ethiopia's capital. Meanwhile, on the government side, it's sort of the government forces as well as Eritrean forces and people from the Amhara ethnic group. And because of this, a lot of other sort of ethnic tensions are being highlighted and sort of aggravated, and which is why we explained that this sort of federation based on ethnic identity may not hold, even if this civil war even if peace is brokered.
Yeah, because it's really hard to solve this problem because what you're doing is choosing between a dictator. Because on the one hand, you've got the TPLF, which have a history of rigged elections and just overall dictatorship sort of model. On the other hand, you've got Abiy, which, well, so far all he's done is the same thing. So the question here is, should the West intervene? Is that a thing that the West should get involved on? What do you think?
It is a scenario where outside aid is needed, because of this war alone, you have about hundreds of thousands of dead Ethiopians and more than 2 million have been displaced and are now homeless. Reports from the UN aid sort of foreign offices, a report says that there are more than 100,000 children at risk of starving to death, with more than 5.2 million people needing emergency help.
Yeah, but what do you do from now, though? Because the governing party, so Abiy, has stopped aid to the Tigray region, right? So you cannot get aid from the West. So what do you do now if you're the West? Like, should you get involved, or should you just sort of say that's none of my business and just stay out of it? But bear in mind, because we've seen what Western intervention can do. We've seen in Afghanistan, we've seen in the Iraq War, we've seen everywhere. So should we intervene is the question.
You either declare war on both sides or you help one side. And I don't think the West wants to do either of those things.
Exactly.
As you said, aid is being stopped for going into the Tigray region, a region which the UN says 80% of essential medicine is no longer available in. But I do believe that the UN and sort of Western sort of countries are trying to negotiate a peace deal between the two. So far, there's been not even peace at this point. They just want a ceasefire so they can start bringing aid to people.
Yeah.
But it seems like with the government's propaganda rhetoric of outsider influence, and it seems the TPLF are also becoming slightly more paranoid about sort of the use of foreign mercenaries. A TPLF person said, but I think with both sides being more cautious about letting outsiders into sort of what they believe is Ethiopian matters.
Yeah.
I think There really is no right answer to this.
Yeah, so the correct answer really for me as well is I don't know, because no matter what you do, I don't think there's a zero sum sort of resolution to this.
I mean, it seems like from the way things are going, the best case scenario is we have another like North Korea South Korea divide where they're just sort of at a state of like frozen war for 100 years, where you have like a hard border. People may be able to move, get aid in between, but ultimately it's still a conflict that these two parties have roped pretty much the whole country into it.
Exactly. So all that's happened so far, from what I've seen, is just the West politely asking them to stop. Sort of like a sort of like a teacher just separating two little kids kind of thing.
We've had 7 UN officials expelled from the country without region, and the government has detained about 16 more UN officials for quote unquote meddling in Ethiopian affairs, and the UN hasn't really responded to that. They've just sort of just sent in paperwork to be like, hey, can we get our guys back? Thank you very much. Please and thank you. Like, I think more needs to be done. I think the UN and I think the African Union as well are trying to make moves, but there needs to be heavier hands to be dealt unless they want another mass sort of ethnic based like massacre to happen within Ethiopia. So now, I know we've talked about some hard-hitting topics today, but we're now going to have to ask sort of the real questions on this show. Why are all jeans 3 fingers above the belly button now? Welcome to a segment that I believe we're calling Dumb Questions Nobody Asks But Us.
That's it. So why are all
Yeah.
jeans 3 fingers above your belly button now? Why do you think that is?
I saw a post talking about jeans and how, like, you know, there were skinny jeans were in fashion, and then like low-riding jeans were in fashion, and now high-waisted jeans are in fashion. I don't know.
I don't believe it.
Maybe
I don't believe
You
it.
don't believe it?
So okay,
What do you mean?
I don't believe it. So if you okay, I'll tell you, but so everyone's got to put their tinfoil hats for this one, all right?
It's right.
Right.
Okay,
So
tinfoil hats on, ladies and gentlemen.
all right. So I believe that it's
Right.
a government conspiracy.
Oh boy.
So they're adding a bit more of the material to make jeans, all in
Right.
exchange to inflate jean prices.
Right. What on earth? Okay. Sorry, jeans are a government conspiracy?
Jeans are a government conspiracy.
Okay. It could be just like people like high-waisted jeans now, cuz it's like it kind of hugs at your stomach, so it may bring like your stomach in a bit.
So it could also be a government conspiracy to hide the obesity level of the population.
I like that. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, no. No. It's to hide the obesity crisis.
I
'Cause
like to
if-
call it big jeans.
Big Big jeans, ladies and gentlemen. I just feel like, I don't know, maybe people think belly buttons are gross now, so they want to have jeans hide them.
Maybe. I don't think that's
Yeah.
as plausible as the conspiracies I've just told you, to be honest.
It's not... You know what? Yeah, my idea is a bit ropey. We'll stick to the government conspiracy explanation. All right, so we're gonna have to ask ourselves another hard-hitting question in our dumb questions nobody asks but us. Why are goat babies called kids? Why aren't they called like goatins or gits?
Gits.
Why are they called kids?
Alright, do you still have your tinfoil hat with you?
I have my tinfoil hat ready and waiting. As soon as I knew I was doing a podcast with you,
Right. So what if, right? Just imagine
Right.
this, right? Close your eyes and imagine what if we're not actually descendant from monkeys.
Okay.
So have you seen like
right.
you've seen goats, right? They have like that little mustache coming on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
I know about the goat mustache.
so that's why we have goatees. Wait, who'd you call someone who's really good at what they do? You call him the goat.
Oh my god. You know what? You're fucking right. I just realized. Jesus.
Don't bring Jesus
You're
into
right.
this.
We're well. If you think we're not descended from monkeys, then you believe in Jesus. But it's so yeah. Damn, that's crazy. I'd never heard of this before. Just damn, we're descended from goats. What came first, the goat kid or the human kid? Like, do you think we named goats kids first, and then we were like, we started nicknaming, children kids because we were like, oh, you're like little baby goats just climbing up everywhere? Or do you think we nicknamed children kids first, and then with goats, farmers just, that thing where you pretend your dog is your baby? Yeah, farmers did that with goats. And now every goat farmer calls their baby goats kids.
The age-old question: what came first, the goats or the kids?
We need answers, ladies and gentlemen. If you ever find out the answer, you can tweet us at mildly interesting on Twitter.
Please do. So for our final news story of this episode, we're going on to COP26, which, if you don't know what it is, it stands for Conference of the Parties, which is basically a time where global leaders and their basically goons fly to a single place so that they can discuss why flying kills the polar bears. So it has been going on for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It has been going on for 2 weeks and ended in the 12th of November. What do you think, Akash? You think it was successful?
I don't know. It's always one of those things where it's like, it could become another Paris Agreement where it's like a historic thing. Like a bunch of different countries agree to, they're in this legally binding, like almost contract that means that they should, they should just help save the world from climate change. Or at least stop like the human factor accelerating climate change.
Yeah, but that's the problem, though, isn't it? It's because it's not really a legal contract. There's no way of enforcing it.
Yeah, and also it's kind of like what stops parties from withdrawing from this contract? Like America withdrew. We saw that America withdrew from the Paris Agreement. So what stops if governments change, what stops them from going, no, fuck you, we want to use fossil fuels, it's cheap.
Exactly. So, but what actually happened? Well, we've got a few measures that were, well, at least not implemented, but agreed upon. 197 countries agreed new rules on limiting greenhouse gas emissions. Although, a lot of people will know this from the coal agreements. China and India, they changed the wording of the agreement itself. So they changed it from phasing out to phasing down, which basically means that they'll keep using it. That's what it means, basically. There was the methane pledge, in which most countries agree to decrease their methane emissions by at least 30% by 2030, which I don't know how feasible it could be, considering that they haven't really done anything to stop emissions whatsoever.
We have seen that several scientists and top boffins on environmental studies have said that crucial 1.5 degrees. So basically, long story short, in 2015, the same year as the Paris Agreement, there was a UN Council that found that if global warming exceeds 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels, then that's like the point of no return. That's when shit hits the fan. And a lot of scientists and smart guys in lab coats with degrees, they said that 1.5 mark is like hanging by a thread. I think one scientist specifically used the phrase hanging by fingernails. So it's some people were calling for more ambitious pledges, but some people were like, this is the most ambitious we can do, and even then it's like, we're missing the mark by millimeters basically.
The problem is that they're saying that's the most ambitious we can do for the past 25 fucking conferences, haven't they? This is COP26. There have been 25 whole conferences in which nothing really happened.
I think another thing I noticed in the coverage was a big thing was money, was like monetary support, and I think that was a big stickler for some of the more the Western world, some of the more developed countries, because in writing they consider, I believe, thing is, right, and here's another thing, sorry, a bit of a tangent, but like the wording of a lot of the contracts is so like ambiguous. Like it literally started Twitter debates. So there were words used like urges, requests, invites, calls upon, and people on Twitter were debating whether urges is stronger or weaker than requests. And it's just like what does any of this mean? Like, is this like legally binding? Like, what does it mean when you say the contract urges developed nations to double their funding by 2025? Like, is that like they have to, or they're like just implied to?
What it means basically is countries saying, well, pretty please, can you please just please do this, please, we need you to please do this. But in the end, nothing is done because we're not allowed to enforce anything upon anyone. So everything is really just voluntary.
Yeah, and it's important to note that some people may criticize the idea of just handing like developing countries or island nations money because of global warming. But you have to admit, like, you can't blame like the British Virgin Isles, an island whose population barely exceeds a big city. You can't blame small island nations for the climate crisis, but they are feeling the worst of it. Like, island nations are the ones that are going to be put under the water due to catastrophic levels of greenhouse gas emissions that people like the US and China emit every year.
I read a quote while researching for this episode, actually. After China and India changed the wording in the coal agreements, the envoy from the Marshall Islands, in an interview, she said, I wish, and I'm quoting here, I wish to read into the record our profound disappointment with the change in the language on coal from phase out to phase down. We accept this change with the greatest reluctance, and she just went on, right? You can just really see how much of a say some of these countries and some of these regions have on what's actually done, right? Because no matter what they do, they're dependent on Western countries and countries that actually emit meaningful levels of greenhouse gases to actually do something about it and to actually like help them out financially.
That reminds me, I took some quotations too, and Professor Richard Betts, MBE, from a bunch of different places that I'm not going to read out because it's like the Star Wars credits, but he said that we are now in damage limitation mode. Despite some progress on promises to cut emissions and protect forests, we're still not yet on track to limit global warming to low levels, so adaptation to current and locked-in climate change is now even more urgent. So yeah, I think everyone agrees, everyone who's in the know agrees that like you cannot stop climate change. Like at this point, it's just you have to learn how to live with it. And the people that are going to get hit the most are island nations and developing nations.
And not only that, even like the newest generation in general, like people with really our age, isn't it?
There was one point, because obviously this is a conference between like the world's biggest leaders, so you expect some like theatrics and some like, you know, stage play. The European Commission's Vice President, Franz Timmermans, which I just love his name, Franz Timmermans, but he gave a speech like holding up a picture of his 1-year-old grandson, like stating that, you know, we're doing this talk is for them, like, you know, the future generations, we're here to to protect them. And what I do want to also mention, so it was scheduled to end on the night of November 12th, right, 6 p.m. But because the countries couldn't get to a formal agreement soon enough, the whole conference went into overtime, and there were overnight talks. And it was like, you know, last minute, people trying to negotiate deals, trying to like, you know, bargain for an agreement. And on the 13th of November, after these overnight talks, Alok Sharma, he had to ask the plenary, like the collection of delegates, he had to ask them twice to like take their seats and disperse. Because informal conversations were still going between negotiators, and huddles of delegates refused to disperse. So that gave me like substitute teacher vibes, where like Alok was trying to like get the class to settle down, and they're just rowdy kids refusing. They're like, no, China needs its coal plants. Give us this, and we'll talk about we'll talk about cutting down.
It is quite frightening that some of these issues are like being dealt with in such irony, really. So I just hope that all the leaders have gone home and that they safe trip in their private jets that for sure don't do anything to affect climate change.
That was like, yeah, that was the most ironic part about it.
So that about covers it for this episode of Mildly Interesting. If you enjoyed it, make sure to follow us on all the social media platforms down below and use them to give us your feedback. If you want to read more into these subjects, we've included some news sources in the show notes as well. So with that being said, I was Ronsent.
And I was Akash Lush.
And this was Mildly Interesting. See you next time.
See you around.